My mother died on a Tuesday. I found out on a Wednesday that someone had used my credit card the night before her funeral. Not a stranger, not some random thief who had skimmed my information at a gas station. Someone with access. Someone who had been inside my home for 3 days straight while I fell apart. Someone who knew where I kept my wallet, who had watched me grieve until I couldn't breathe anymore, and who had then, at 9:47 p.m., while I was upstairs crying into a pillow, slipped my card out of my purse and driven 40 minutes to a home goods store. $260. Throw pillows, a decorative mirror, a scented candle set. My mother was not yet in the ground. I found the charge sitting in my car in the church parking lot, 20 minutes before her funeral, doing the reflexive anxiety check of my banking app that I had developed over years of being the person who managed every financial thread in every room I ever occupied. I stared at the merchant name. I stared at the timestamp. I stared at the amount, $260, and I thought about my mother, who had worked 2 jobs for 20 years to make sure I never went without, who had never once in her life taken something that wasn't hers, who was lying in a casket inside that church, waiting to be buried. I put my phone in my purse. I walked into the church. I sat in the front pew. I buried my mother, and I smiled at every single person who came to offer condolences, including the one who had used my credit card to redecorate while I was sleeping off grief. I smiled. I thanked people. I held it together with both hands. Inside, something had already started moving. Quiet, precise, completely inevitable. If someone has ever taken advantage of you at the lowest moment of your life and then smiled at your face like nothing happened, hit that like button right now. Subscribe, because what I built in the weeks after that funeral was the most satisfying thing I have ever done, and I did it without raising my voice once. My name is Camille Turner. I'm 36 years old. I work as a senior financial auditor, which means my entire professional life is built around one skill: finding what people think is hidden and making it visible. I follow money. I document patterns. I build cases out of details that other people dismissed as minor. I am very, very good at my job, and the woman who used my credit card the night before my mother's funeral had absolutely no idea who she had decided to steal from. Let me take you back, because context is everything, and the context here goes back further than one credit card charge. My mother raised me alone. My father left when I was 9, and my mother simply absorbed that fact the way she absorbed every difficult fact, quietly, without making it anyone else's burden. She worked a day job at an insurance office and a weekend job at a catering company, and she made sure I had everything I needed, and she never, not once, complained about it in a way that was meant to make me feel guilty for existing. She was the most quietly strong person I have ever known, the kind of strong that doesn't announce itself, the kind that just keeps showing up. When she got sick, I took care of everything. I want to be precise about that word, everything. It meant managing her medical appointments, navigating her insurance claims, which were a second full-time job on their own, coordinating with 3 different specialists, handling her disability paperwork, paying her remaining bills when her income wasn't enough, driving 3 hours every single weekend for 14 months, leaving Friday after work and coming back Sunday night to be ready for Monday morning. It meant being the person she called at 2 a.m. when she was scared and staying on the phone until the fear passed. I did all of this while working full-time and while being married to a man named Derek, whose mother, Renee, had never fully reconciled herself to the fact that I had a life and obligations that existed before she came into it. Derek was not a cruel man. I want to be honest about that. He loved me. He was also someone who had grown up with a mother who filled every room she entered, and who had learned, somewhere along the way, that the most comfortable position in relation to Renee was simply not to push back. That worked fine when pushing back wasn't necessary. It became a problem when it was. Renee was generous the way some people are generous, loudly and visibly, and in ways that made sure everyone in the room understood the generosity was coming from her. She gave excellent gifts. She remembered birthdays. She could make anyone feel warmly welcomed within the first 10 minutes of meeting her. She also had a way of making her priorities automatically become everyone else's priorities, so smoothly and naturally that you rarely noticed it happening until you were already reorganizing your life around something you had never consciously agreed to commit to. During the 14 months of my mother's illness, Renee's patience for my divided attention ran out around month 3. She didn't say that directly. She would never say anything directly that could be used against her. What she said was that she understood, that of course family came first, that she was praying for my mother. She said all the right things, but underneath the right words there was a current I could feel without being able to quote, a sense of imposition, a quiet resentment that my mother's dying was an inconvenience to the family calendar. Derek felt it too, I think. He never articulated it, but there was a subtle withdrawal in those months, a way of being physically present in our home while being emotionally somewhere else that I noticed and filed away because I didn't have bandwidth to address it while I was also managing a terminal illness 3 hours away. My mother died on a Tuesday morning. I drove home that evening. Renee was already at my house when I arrived. She had let herself in with the key Derek had given her, which was a habit I had raised with him exactly once and dropped when the conversation went nowhere productive. She had made food. She held me when I walked in and said she was so sorry, and I believe she meant it in whatever way she was capable of meaning it. That night, I cried until I was empty. The next morning, I got up and made funeral arrangements because someone had to, and I was always the someone. Renee came to the house each of the 3 days between the death and the funeral. She sat on my couch. She drank the coffee I made. She accepted the food neighbors brought. She was present in the way she was always present, fully, centeredly, as though the space naturally organized itself around her. At some point during those 3 days, she went into my purse. I don't know the exact moment. I don't know what she told herself while she was doing it, whether she called it a loan she'd repay, a small thing that didn't matter, a detail unworthy of a conversation. What I know is that at 9:47 p.m. the night before my mother's funeral, someone made a $260 purchase at a home goods store 40 minutes from my house, and the only people with access to my space during those 3 days were Derek and Renee. I confronted Derek quietly the night after the funeral. He went pale in stages. Then he said, almost to himself, she needed some things for the house. He said it like that explained it, like my grief was a reasonable window for home shopping. I looked at him for a long moment. Okay, I said, just that. Okay. And I went upstairs and I opened my laptop and I started building. Here is the thing about being a financial auditor. You understand leverage. You understand that the most powerful position in any conflict is not the loudest one, it's the most documented one. You understand that patience is not weakness, it is strategy. And you understand that $260 is never just $260. It is a behavior, and behaviors have patterns. And patterns, once documented, tell a story that is very difficult to argue with in rooms where arguments are decided by evidence. I spent the next 3 weeks pulling records. Not just the credit card charge, everything. I went back through 2 years of our shared financial life and I documented every pattern I found. The grocery deliveries Renee had been ordering to our house on my account without discussing it, I found 14 separate instances. The charges from home goods and garden centers and specialty food markets that appeared on our joint accounts during Renee's visits, I found 22 of them, totaling just over $3,000, most of them in categories that aligned with Renee's tastes rather than mine or Derek's. I documented every family event I had been pressured to attend during the months I was managing my mother's illness, cross-referenced with Derek's call logs, which he had left accessible on the shared family tablet, to illustrate the pattern of coordination between him and Renee to ensure my compliance. I documented the key access, the timestamps of entries to our home when neither Derek nor I were present, pulled from our security system logs, which Renee had never thought to consider because she had never imagined I would look. I built a file, tabbed, organized, the way I build every file professionally. Then I called a lawyer. Not a divorce lawyer, an asset protection attorney who specialized in financial disputes. I explained the situation, she reviewed my documentation. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "This is thorough." "It's what I do," I said. We discussed options. What I wanted was not a lawsuit. Lawsuits are loud and long, and they give the other party a platform. What I wanted was leverage, quiet leverage, the kind that changes behavior permanently without requiring a courtroom. The attorney drafted a letter, formal, itemized, every unauthorized charge documented with dates and amounts and merchant names. The letter noted that under applicable law, unauthorized use of another person's credit or debit accounts constituted financial fraud regardless of the relationship between the parties. It noted that the documentation had been preserved and could be submitted to relevant authorities. It noted that the writer was prepared to pursue all available legal remedies unless the matter was resolved through restitution and a formal agreement. The letter was sent to Renee directly, not through Derek, on a Tuesday morning 3 weeks after my mother's funeral. She called Derek within the hour. Derek came home that evening pale and shaken. "Camille, what is this?" "Accountability," I said. "You're going to destroy the family over a credit card charge?" I put my full documentation on the table between us, all of it. The $3,000, the grocery deliveries, the security logs, the 2 years of quiet financial erosion that had been happening in my own home while I was too busy caring for my dying mother to audit my own life. He sat with it for a long time. "He didn't know it was this much," he said. "You didn't ask," I said. "That was a choice." The negotiation that followed was not a screaming match. It was a settlement discussion because I had made it a settlement discussion by arriving with documentation instead of emotion. Renee reimbursed the full amount, the credit card charge and everything else, transferred to my personal account within 10 days. The key to our house was returned. The grocery account access was revoked. Derek and I had conversations that were long overdue, real ones, about his mother's access to our life, about the pattern of accommodation that had been running invisibly underneath our marriage for years. Those conversations were hard. Some of them changed things between us in ways that needed changing. Some of them I am still sitting with. But here's what I know. Renee received a certified letter 2 weeks after the reimbursement, drafted by my attorney, outlining the terms of future interaction with our household. Formal, legal, permanently on record. She did not send a Christmas card that year. I did not miss it. My mother had a saying she repeated so often it became background noise, the kind of thing you stop hearing until suddenly you need it. She said, "The people who think you're too quiet to fight back are always the most surprised when you do." I thought about that saying a lot during those 3 weeks of documentation. I thought about her working double shifts without complaint, building a quiet empire of stability with no audience and no applause. I thought about how she had raised me to do the same, and to know, underneath the quietness, exactly what I was worth. Renee thought she had found a window in my grief. She had found a mirror instead, and what it reflected back was the most expensive mistake she ever made. My mother has been gone for 2 years. I drink my coffee every morning in a mug she gave me. I sit at my kitchen table in a house where the locks have been changed and the accounts are mine, and the only people with access to my space are people I have specifically and consciously invited. My audit file is still saved on my laptop, encrypted, backed up in 2 locations, not because I expect to need it again, because keeping records is how I love myself. It is how I honor a woman who kept every receipt and paid every bill, and never once let anyone make her feel like her invisible labor wasn't the most real thing in the room. It was the most real thing in the room. So is mine. What did you do when you found your way back to yourself? Subscribe for more stories.